So when we look at another big question that folks have, and I see some of it in the chat also, is tell us about election judges and our need for election judges, in particular during this time of COVID. Patty, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll take that. Election judges are huge, and the fear of this COVID, if it hits again as hard as it's hitting right now in November, we're going to have people that are going to be sick or who have been exposed, and all of a sudden you might have a precinct that's lost 4 judges. And a lot of times when you're working, it's you and your friends actually that staff these places, because you talk your friends into going with you to vote in a precinct. So the chances are you're not going to have enough judges. So the more judges, the better. I would think if I was still running this, I would try and get at least double of what I needed. And then if I got that, then you have the ability to have people work half shifts, which nobody really wants to work that whole shift. That's a long day. So that's my advice.
Patty,
I can't remember the question.
Could you briefly touch on, we were talking about the need for election judges. Could you talk a little bit about the program that you developed in Blue Earth County with high school students?
Oh, sure. You know, high school students are our best kids, the best election judges. They were swift with electronics, and technology, which we weren't. And my goal was always 50. Some years I got more. Every presidential year I'd try and get 100. So we could have 2 in every precinct in the city, and then we would, share with the other cities and towns. What we found is the high school kids, when they went to college, continued on serving. So wherever they were going to college, then they would be election judges in that community, even in Mankato if they stayed. So we found that it kept them engaged, and it was one of the best programs I ever had.
Wonderful, thank you. Because I think everybody knows on the call, if you voted, we don't have the data. We were talking about this the other day, but the percentage of women over 60 that are election judges is probably in the, for sure in the 90 percentage points somewhere. So Jamie, what do you have briefly on election judges?
Unmute myself. So what Steve talks about a lot is what we've seen in other states. So folks remember Wisconsin, folks remember some of what happened in Georgia. It's no surprise to anyone that most election judges tend to skew older into some of those categories of folks where they're higher risk for severe COVID symptoms. And so a lot of those folks are just simply choosing not to serve as election judges this year out of their safety. Wisconsin was an abnormality because they held an election the first week of April, right after COVID was really hitting and no one had any idea what was going on with it. So things happened to them like in Milwaukee, and I'm sorry, I'm not gonna remember the numbers perfectly, but in Milwaukee, they had like 125 polling locations. But when so many election judges dropped off last minute in that week before election day, they actually ended up only having, I want to say, like 4 or 5 polling places in the entire city of Milwaukee. So people were showing up to vote at these handful of locations and waiting in line for hours and hours. And that's what Steve is pretty nervous about. This is, to be candid, what Steve is more anxious about than anything else this year is making sure that there are enough election judges willing to work. We actually worked with the Department of Homeland Security and the procurement office in Minnesota to secure enough hand sanitizer pumps, disinfectant, paper towels, heavy duty masks for election judges, and the kind of single use masks for voters who come in without one, in order to provide those to every polling location throughout the state. Me and one of my coworkers tested a significant amount of hand sanitizers and pumps, so learned a little more about that than I ever thought I would. And then through the CARES Act that was passed federally earlier this year, the same act that gave folks $1,200 stipends from the government, gave a significant amount of money to be spent specifically on elections this year and how they're impacted by COVID. And so that money is being spent by a lot of local jurisdictions on things like the plastic plexiglass that you see at a lot of convenience stores and Target and things like that. They're spending it on even more hand sanitizer, more masks. They're spending it on, you know, the little stickers that you put on the floor to show where to stand 6 feet apart from each other. And so significant money is being spent to keep polling places as clean as possible in hopes that that makes judges who are on the fence about serving more willing to serve. But we are very, very, very nervous about having enough election judges. So if you are someone you know is willing to take that on, please serve. So very interested in making sure that people have as much access to clean polling places as possible, which means needing judges. It takes 30,000 election judges across the state of Minnesota to run this election. And if we even have just 25,000 instead of 30, that can have a huge impact on people's capacity to vote at their local polling place. So please sign up.
Thanks, Jamie. And just taking from that, I think we follow Blue Earth County's math of double training. So it'd be great to have 60,000 trained, just in case we need to kick them in.
If we get 35,000 trained, we're going to be happy. 60 would be the dream. Yeah.
I think the other piece, and this is something that the interns have been working on too, is, you know, letting young people know that this is a paid position. It's $19 an hour, and we need to figure out how to get younger people to be election judges under this time of COVID.